Darnell Jenkins had always known he was different. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, he spent much of his childhood sketching on scraps of paper, painting on old cardboard boxes, and creating vibrant murals on abandoned walls in his community. His art was raw, emotional, and unfiltered, a reflection of his struggles, his heritage, and his dreams. While the people in his neighborhood admired his work and often encouraged him to pursue his passion, Darnell had always dreamed of his pieces hanging in a high-end gallery, showcased to art enthusiasts from around the world. One chilly morning, Darnell decided to take a leap of faith. With his portfolio tucked under his arm and a few of his favorite pieces carefully wrapped in brown paper, he walked into Whitaker Fine Arts, a renowned gallery nestled in the heart of the city's upscale art district. The gallery's reputation preceded it, glittering receptions, features in art magazines, and a clientele list that included celebrities and millionaires. Darnell had spent weeks mustering the courage to approach the gallery owner, Mr. Whitaker, whose opinion could make or break an artist's career. As he entered the gallery, the space radiated an air of exclusivity. Polished floors reflected the soft lighting that illuminated large canvases hanging on pristine white walls. Wealthy patrons strolled leisurely, discussing art in hushed tones, while a string quartet played softly in the background. Darnell's heart raced. His sneakers squeaked against the marble floor, drawing glances from a few patrons who raised their eyebrows disapprovingly. Mr. Whitaker, a tall man with slicked-back silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed wealth, was overseeing the arrangements of a new collection. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, exuding authority and arrogance. "Excuse me, Mr. Whitaker," Darnell said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. "My name is Darnell Jenkins. I'm an artist, and I was hoping to show you some of my work." Mr. Whitaker turned slowly, his gaze sweeping over Darnell from head to toe. His lips curled into a faint smirk as he took in the young man's worn jeans, scuffed sneakers, and hand-me-down jacket. "You're an artist?" he asked, his tone dripping with condescension. "Yes, sir," Darnell replied, holding out his portfolio. "I've been working on some pieces that I think might interest your gallery." With a dismissive chuckle, Mr. Whitaker took the portfolio, flipping through the pages with exaggerated boredom. The vibrant colors and bold strokes that Darnell had poured his soul into barely registered with him. "This, graffiti style, is hardly what we cater to here," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Our clients prefer sophisticated art, not something that looks like it belongs on a subway wall." Darnell's face burned with humiliation. "It's not graffiti," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's a blend of expressionism and Afrocentric themes. It tells stories of struggle, resilience, and hope." Mr. Whitaker rolled his eyes. "That's all very touching, but this isn't a community art fair. Our clients expect refinement, not urban experimentation." The words stung, each syllable like a slap to Darnell's pride. "I see," Darnell said quietly, taking back his portfolio. "Thank you for your time." As Darnell turned to leave, Mr. Whitaker couldn't resist one final jab. "Next time, try a bit of polish. Maybe then you'll stand a chance." Darnell walked out of the gallery, his steps heavy with disappointment. Outside, the bustling city seemed to mock his dreams. He found a bench nearby and sat down, clutching his portfolio. His mind raced with self-doubt, but beneath the sting of rejection, a flicker of determination remained. He thought of his mother, who had always believed in his talent, and his late grandmother, who used to tell him, "Baby, your art will change the world one day." Lost in thought, Darnell didn't notice the older man sitting beside him until he spoke. "Rough day?" the man asked, his voice kind but tinged with curiosity. Darnell looked up and saw a man in a simple suit with a friendly smile. "You could say that," Darnell replied. "I just got laughed out of a gallery." The man gestured to Darnell's portfolio. "Mind if I take a look?" Darnell hesitated but handed it over. The man flipped through the pages, his expression changing from mild interest to genuine admiration. "This is incredible," he said, his tone earnest. "Your use of color, the emotion, it's powerful." Thanks, Darnell said, his voice laced with disbelief. But apparently, it's not refined enough for places like Whitaker Fine Arts. The man chuckled. Whitaker's been in the game for years, but his taste is outdated. The world is changing, and art like yours has a voice that needs to be heard. Darnell's curiosity piqued. Who are you? The man extended his hand. Name's Harrison. I'm a collector. And I think the world is ready for your work. As the two men shook hands, Darnell felt a spark of hope reignite within him. This chance encounter would soon set him on a path he never imagined, a path that would not only elevate his art but also rewrite the rules of the art world itself. The days following Darnell's encounter with Mr. Whitaker were a whirlwind of emotions. He replayed the gallery owner's condescending words in his mind, each time trying to shake off the sting of rejection. But his meeting with Mr. Harrison, the kind stranger on the park bench, lingered in his thoughts, a seed of hope growing in the fertile soil of his determination. True to his word, Mr. Harrison had taken a keen interest in Darnell's work. That weekend, Harrison invited Darnell to showcase a few of his pieces at a local community center's art exhibit, a modest yet lively venue known for supporting grassroots artists. The event wasn't glitzy, but it was genuine, filled with people who appreciated art for its message rather than its price tag. Darnell selected 3 of his favorite pieces for the exhibit. One, titled Resilience, was a vibrant painting of a young black boy standing tall amid a storm, his face illuminated with defiance and hope. Another, Roots and Wings, depicted an ancestral tree whose roots intertwined with modern urban landscapes. The final piece, Eclipse of Shadows, was an abstract representation of overcoming systemic oppression. The community center bustled with energy as locals admired the artwork, mingled, and shared stories. Darnell stood near his display, answering questions and watching as people connected with his work. It was the first time he'd seen strangers moved to tears by his creations. A woman clutched her chest as she gazed at Resilience, saying, "This is my son's story. It's our story." Unbeknownst to Darnell, one visitor at the event was more than just an admirer. A young art blogger named Mia Summers, known for discovering hidden gems in the art world, had stumbled upon the exhibit. Struck by the emotional depth and bold storytelling of Darnell's pieces, she took photos of his work and posted them on her blog and social media with a heartfelt caption. Meet Darnell Jenkins, an artist who paints the soul of a community. His work speaks of pain, hope, and triumph in a way that demands to be seen. This is art that changes hearts. The post took off like wildfire. Within hours, it was shared thousands of times, reaching art enthusiasts, critics, and celebrities alike. Comments flooded in. "This is what the art world needs. I'd buy every single piece. Darnell Jenkins is the future of art." By the next morning, Darnell's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. His email inbox overflowed with inquiries from people wanting to purchase his work, feature him in exhibitions, or simply express their admiration. He stared at the screen in disbelief, the magnitude of the moment sinking in. Among the flood of messages was one that stood out, a personal email from Mr. Harrison. "Darnell," it read, "I saw your work featured online and wanted to congratulate you. The world is finally waking up to your brilliance. Let's meet, there's something I'd like to discuss." Darnell met Harrison later that week at a cozy cafe downtown. The older man greeted him warmly, holding a glossy art magazine that had Darnell's Resilience on its cover. "You've gone viral, my friend," Harrison said with a grin. "The art world is buzzing about you." Darnell chuckled nervously. "It's all happened so fast. I don't even know how to handle it." "That's where I come in," Harrison said, leaning forward. "I've been collecting and investing in art for decades. I know how to navigate this world. What you need is a platform, a launchpad to take your work global. Let me sponsor you." Darnell blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Sponsor me?" Harrison nodded. "I'll cover everything: studio space, supplies, marketing, exhibition costs. All I ask in return is that you keep creating. Your work is too important to be ignored." For a moment, Darnell was speechless. He thought of all the years he'd struggled to buy paint and canvases, the times he'd skipped meals to fund his art. Now, someone was offering him the opportunity of a lifetime. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. Harrison's expression softened. "Because the world needs voices like yours. I've seen too many artists with unique perspectives get overlooked because they don't fit the mold. You don't just paint pictures, Darnell. You paint truths." Darnell accepted the offer, and true to Harrison's promise, his career skyrocketed. Harrison arranged for a solo exhibition at a prestigious New York gallery. The event drew art critics, collectors, and celebrities, all eager to see the work of the artist who had taken the internet by storm. On the night of the exhibition, Darnell stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by his pieces. Guests marveled at the raw emotion and bold narratives in his work. One critic declared, "Darnell Jenkins is not just an artist, he's a movement." Another called him the voice of a generation. By the end of the evening, every piece in the exhibition had sold, some for prices Darnell couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. He donated a portion of the proceeds to the community center that had first displayed his art, ensuring that other aspiring artists would have the same opportunities. As Darnell returned home that night, he thought about how close he'd come to giving up. He remembered the humiliation at Whitaker Fine Arts and smiled, knowing that rejection had only fueled his determination. His journey was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like the world was finally listening to his story. And he was ready to tell it louder than ever. Darnell Jenkins' life transformed almost overnight. With Mr. Harrison's mentorship and his work's viral popularity, the young artist began receiving invitations to showcase his art at elite exhibitions worldwide. From New York to Paris, London to Tokyo, Darnell's name became synonymous with a new wave of socially conscious art that demanded attention and evoked profound emotions. Each exhibition was a spectacle. Crowds flocked to galleries to witness his bold and evocative pieces that blended Afrocentric themes with modern expressionism. Resilience, the painting that had captured the world's attention, became iconic, sparking discussions in classrooms, boardrooms, and even political forums. Critics called his work a revolution of color and truth, while collectors eagerly bid millions to own a piece of his genius. Darnell, however, remained grounded. Despite his meteoric rise, he didn't forget the people who had supported him in his early days. He often credited his community, his late grandmother's wisdom, and the kindness of strangers like Mr. Harrison for his success. Instead of indulging in the trappings of fame, Darnell focused on using his platform to uplift others. Meanwhile, at Whitaker Fine Arts, as Darnell's star rose, the world of art began to change. More galleries and collectors sought diverse voices and fresh perspectives, moving away from the rigid traditionalism that had dominated the industry for decades. This shift hit Mr. Whitaker's gallery hard. Once the pinnacle of exclusivity, Whitaker Fine Arts found itself struggling to stay relevant. Attendance at their exhibitions dwindled, and the gallery's once loyal clientele began to seek out new, vibrant artists whose work reflected the changing cultural landscape. Mr. Whitaker, however, remained oblivious to the root of his problems. He blamed trendy fads and overly political art for the decline, failing to recognize that his own dismissal of rising talents like Darnell had left him out of touch with the art world's evolution. One afternoon, as Whitaker flipped through an art magazine, his eyes landed on a familiar face. There, on a 2-page spread, was Darnell Jenkins standing beside Eclipse of Shadows, his abstract masterpiece. The headline read, "Darnell Jenkins, the voice of a new generation." Whitaker's jaw tightened as he read about Darnell's meteoric rise, the millions his work had earned, and the global impact of his art. "How did I not see it?" Whitaker muttered, his voice tinged with regret. He remembered the young man who had walked into his gallery months ago, portfolio in hand, only to be dismissed with a sneer. The thought that Darnell could have been his gallery's star haunted him. Worse, Whitaker knew that if he didn't adapt, his gallery would soon become irrelevant. Darnell's global impact. Darnell's fame wasn't just about his art's monetary value, it was about the stories his pieces told. Each painting became a cultural moment, sparking conversations about systemic inequality, racial justice, and the resilience of marginalized communities. Schools used his work to teach students about history and identity, while activists carried banners inspired by his art during marches. One particularly notable exhibition was held in Paris, where Darnell debuted a new series titled Echoes of the Diaspora. The collection featured 10 massive canvases, each telling a different chapter of the African experience, from the transatlantic slave trade to modern-day triumphs. The exhibition was hailed as a masterpiece of storytelling, and tickets sold out weeks in advance. At the exhibition's opening night, Darnell delivered a heartfelt speech. "Art," he said, "isn't just about what hangs on a wall. It's about what it makes you feel, what it inspires you to do, and how it connects us as human beings. I hope my work reminds everyone that even in the darkest times, there is light, there is strength, and there is hope." The audience erupted into applause, with many moved to tears. Among the attendees were celebrities, politicians, and influential figures from all walks of life. By the end of the evening, Darnell's paintings had sold for record-breaking sums, and donations from the event funded art programs in underserved communities. A humble champion for change. Despite his wealth and acclaim, Darnell refused to abandon his roots. He continued to live modestly, investing his earnings in causes close to his heart. He established scholarships for young artists, funded community art centers, and started initiatives to bring art education to schools in low-income neighborhoods. One day, during a televised interview, the host asked him, "With all your success, what drives you to give so much back?" Darnell smiled. "I remember what it felt like to have a dream but not the resources to make it real. Art saved me, it gave me a voice when I felt unheard. If I can help even one kid find their voice through art, then every brushstroke I've ever painted is worth it." The ripple effect on Whitaker Fine Arts. Word of Darnell's humility and generosity spread, further solidifying his legacy. Meanwhile, Mr. Whitaker's gallery continued to flounder. Desperate for relevance, Whitaker finally decided to embrace change, albeit begrudgingly. He reached out to rising artists, hoping to align himself with the new wave of talent. But his reputation as an elitist who had dismissed Darnell Jenkins worked against him. "Isn't this the guy who laughed at Darnell?" people whispered. The art community, now rallying behind inclusivity and diversity, had little sympathy for Whitaker's plight. As the cracks in Whitaker's empire grew deeper, Darnell's influence only expanded. The artist remained a humble yet powerful force, determined to reshape the art world into a space where every voice could be heard, every story could be told, and no dream was too small to achieve. Darnell Jenkins wasn't just an artist anymore, he was a movement, a beacon of hope for a new generation. And his rise was only the beginning. The year was 2027, and Darnell Jenkins was a household name. His art graced the walls of world-renowned galleries, his interviews were quoted in magazines and TED Talks, and his philanthropic endeavors had transformed countless lives. Despite his fame and fortune, Darnell remained the same humble man he had always been, grateful for his journey and intent on paving the way for others. One sunny afternoon, as Darnell flipped through a stack of mail in his penthouse studio, his assistant, Maria, walked in holding a tablet. "You're not going to believe this," she said, handing it to him. The screen displayed an article about Whitaker Fine Arts. The headline read, "Once dominant gallery facing closure amid financial struggles." Darnell arched an eyebrow as he skimmed the article. It detailed the gallery's plummeting sales, outdated practices, and inability to attract new talent. It mentioned that Mr. Whitaker was reportedly looking for a buyer to salvage his business. A wry smile tugged at the corners of Darnell's lips. He hadn't thought about Mr. Whitaker in years, not since the day the gallery owner had mocked him and dismissed his art. Yet, as Darnell read on, he felt no malice or desire for revenge. Instead, he saw an opportunity, a chance to turn a symbol of elitism into a beacon of inclusivity. "Maria," Darnell said, handing back the tablet, "schedule a meeting with Mr. Whitaker. I'd like to discuss buying his gallery." The return to Whitaker Fine Arts. The following week, Darnell walked through the familiar glass doors of Whitaker Fine Arts. The once pristine gallery now had a faded, neglected air. The walls that had once displayed million-dollar paintings were sparsely decorated with uninspired pieces, and the polished floors had lost their gleam. A handful of patrons wandered aimlessly, their footsteps echoing in the near-empty space. Darnell approached the reception desk, where a young assistant greeted him with forced enthusiasm. "Welcome to Whitaker Fine Arts. Do you have an appointment?" "Yes," Darnell said calmly. "I'm here to see Mr. Whitaker about purchasing the gallery." The assistant's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, of course. Let me inform him. Please, have a seat." Darnell wandered the gallery as he waited, his gaze lingering on the walls where his art might have hung had things gone differently. He felt a strange sense of closure being back in this space, not as a struggling artist seeking approval, but as a man who had forged his own path. A desperate negotiation. After a few minutes, Mr. Whitaker emerged from his office. His once confident stride was now tempered with weariness, and the lines on his face seemed deeper. He extended a hand with a polite smile. "Mr. Jenkins, thank you for coming. Shall we step into my office?" Darnell followed him into the same office where he had once been humiliated. Now, the space seemed smaller, cluttered with papers and evidence of a man trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. "I understand you're interested in purchasing the gallery," Mr. Whitaker began, his tone cordial but cautious. "I am," Darnell replied, his expression neutral. "I believe there's potential to revitalize it." Whitaker's eyes lit up, and he launched into a sales pitch. "You're absolutely right. Whitaker Fine Arts has a long-standing reputation for excellence. With the right investment, it could regain its former glory. I'm willing to sell for a very reasonable price, $10 million. Darnell suppressed a chuckle. He knew the gallery wasn't worth half that amount. $10 million, he repeated, raising an eyebrow. That seems steep for a gallery in decline. Whitaker's face reddened slightly, but he recovered quickly. You have to consider the brand value, the location, the history. It's a rare opportunity. Darnell leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Mr. Whitaker, do you recognize me?" Whitaker frowned, studying Darnell's face. There was a flicker of confusion, followed by a spark of recognition that quickly turned to shock. His jaw dropped. You're that artist. Jenkins. Darnell Jenkins." "That's right," Darnell said, his voice calm. "The artist you dismissed years ago. The one you said wasn't refined enough for your gallery." Whitaker's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't realize." Darnell held up a hand. "You don't need to explain. What's done is done. I'm not here to dwell on the past. I'm here because I see potential in this space, not for what it was, but for what it could be." Whitaker looked both embarrassed and relieved. "I see. Well, I hope we can move forward. Sealing the deal." Darnell made a counteroffer that was fair but firm, reflecting the gallery's current state. After some negotiation, Whitaker agreed, grateful for the lifeline. The papers were signed, and within weeks, Whitaker Fine Arts officially became Jenkins Collective. Darnell wasted no time transforming the gallery. He brought in a team to renovate the space, replacing its sterile atmosphere with vibrant, welcoming energy. He filled the walls with art from underrepresented artists, creating a platform for voices that had been overlooked. The gallery hosted community events, workshops, and exhibitions that celebrated diversity and inclusion. A symbol of change. The reopening of the gallery was a grand affair. Critics, collectors, and members of the community came together to celebrate its new chapter. Darnell stood at the center of it all, delivering a heartfelt speech. "This gallery once symbolized exclusivity," he said. "Today, it stands for opportunity. Art is for everyone, it tells our stories, unites us, and inspires change. Jenkins Collective is a place where every artist, regardless of background, can shine." As the crowd erupted into applause, Darnell caught sight of Mr. Whitaker standing in the back, clapping slowly. Their eyes met, and Whitaker nodded, a gesture of respect and perhaps a silent apology. Darnell nodded back, content. He had turned the tables, not out of spite, but to build something greater. And in doing so, he proved that the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's creating a legacy that uplifts others. The transformation of Whitaker Fine Arts into Jenkins Collective was nothing short of revolutionary. The once exclusive gallery, which had once prided itself on catering to the elite, was now a vibrant, inclusive space where artists from all walks of life found their voices celebrated. Under Darnell's leadership, the gallery became a beacon of creativity and hope, a place where stories that were often overlooked took center stage. The walls of Jenkins Collective were alive with diversity. Paintings, sculptures, and installations showcased the experiences of marginalized communities, giving visitors a profound understanding of cultures, struggles, and triumphs. Crowds flocked to the gallery daily, drawn not only by the art but by the energy of a place that felt alive with purpose. Workshops and mentorship programs flourished, nurturing the next generation of artists. Mr. Whitaker's humble return. One quiet afternoon, as Darnell sat in his office reviewing submissions for an upcoming exhibition, a knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Come in," he said, expecting one of his staff members. To his surprise, it was Mr. Whitaker. The man who had once epitomized arrogance now stood before Darnell, looking older, humbled, and nervous. His tailored suits had been replaced by a simple blazer, and his once confident demeanor was tinged with hesitation. "Mr. Jenkins," Whitaker began, his voice tentative, "I hope I'm not intruding." Darnell gestured for him to sit. "Not at all. What can I do for you?" Whitaker sat down, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice breaking slightly, "for how I treated you all those years ago. I was arrogant, blind to what real art is, and I let my prejudices cloud my judgment. I can't tell you how much I regret it." Darnell listened quietly, his expression unreadable. Whitaker continued, "I see now what you've built here. It's extraordinary. You've turned this gallery into something I never could, a place that truly matters. And I was wondering if you might allow me to work here." Darnell raised an eyebrow, surprised by the request. "You're asking me for a job?" "Yes," Whitaker said, nodding earnestly. "I know it's a lot to ask, and I don't deserve it. But I want to be a part of what you're doing here. I want to learn from you, to understand the art world as it should be, not as I thought it was. Forgiveness and growth." Darnell studied Whitaker for a moment, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "You know," he said finally, "it takes courage to admit when you're wrong. And it takes even more courage to ask for a second chance." Whitaker nodded, his eyes downcast. "I've made mistakes, plenty of them. But I want to do better." Darnell leaned back in his chair. "I'm willing to give you that chance, but there are conditions. If you want to work here, you'll start at an entry-level position. You'll attend diversity and inclusion training, just like every other employee, and you'll be part of our mission to make the art world a better place for everyone. This isn't just about working at a gallery, it's about understanding what we stand for." Whitaker's face lit up with gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes." "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins." "Call me Darnell," he said with a small smile. "Welcome to the team." The gallery as a movement. As Jenkins Collective flourished, so did its impact on the broader art world. Darnell's vision of inclusivity inspired other galleries and institutions to follow suit. Art schools restructured their curricula to highlight underrepresented artists, and collectors began seeking out works that told real, diverse stories. Whitaker, true to his word, embraced his new role. He attended every training session, humbly learned from younger staff members, and became an advocate for the gallery's mission. Over time, he earned the respect of his colleagues and even Darnell himself. The gallery became more than a space for art, it became a movement. Partnerships with community organizations brought art programs to underserved areas, while global initiatives connected artists across continents. Jenkins Collective hosted annual exhibitions called the Voices Project, featuring artists from marginalized backgrounds, with proceeds going toward social causes. One evening, during the gallery's anniversary celebration, Darnell stood before a packed crowd to deliver a speech. Whitaker stood among the staff, his face filled with pride and humility. "This gallery isn't just about art," Darnell said, his voice carrying across the room. "It's about breaking barriers, challenging norms, and creating a world where every story is valued. Art has the power to heal, to unite, and to inspire. And that's what Jenkins Collective will always stand for." The audience erupted in applause, the sound reverberating through the gallery like a heartbeat. As the celebration continued, Whitaker approached Darnell. "You've built something incredible here," he said. "Thank you for letting me be a part of it." Darnell smiled. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow, Mr. Whitaker. Even you." In the years that followed, Jenkins Collective became a cornerstone of the global art community. Darnell's legacy wasn't just in his paintings but in the lives he touched, the barriers he broke, and the world he helped reshape, one brushstroke, one story, and one chance at a time.